Hello, me again. I'm going to be discussing the early Weimar government and the political problems that it had. I'll be dealing with the economic problems of the Weimar government in a separate post, but it's important to remember that the economic and political problems are heavily linked, so don't think they're different. There's a lot of links in there, and I'll make that clear in the one on economic problems. So the early Weimar governments, the key person to remember is Friedrich Ebert. He becomes the leader, the chancellor of a new Weimar system after the Kaiser abdicates. He immediately calls an armistice with the powers, the Entente, Britain, France and America, because World War I is still going on. And when Ebert becomes leader of the new Germany, Germany is pretty much in a state of civil war. Let's not forget, workers has taken over towns, there had been a mutiny in Kiel, and soldiers had formed collectives to take over particular areas. So Germany was in a state of civil war. So right from the beginning, Ebert was under the cosh. He was at a real disadvantage. So he had a lot of problems to contend with. Now the first thing you need to establish about the Weimar government is not actually, initially at least, based in Berlin, the capital of Germany. It's based in Weimar, because Berlin was seen as too violent, not the best place to hold a new government. Well, not long after the creation of this new Weimar government, a myth kind of grew up that Germany was stabbed in the back, that they lost World War I not because they were militarily defeated, although of course that was pretty much the reason why they lost the war, but that they were stabbed in the back by the SPD, these socialist politicians, and later the myth of the stab in the back was linked to Judaism, and that's what the Nazis later linked it to. Well, were Germany stabbed in the back? No, not really. It might have been seen as that with all these new collectives and workers on strike and the mutiny in Kiel. But all in all, Germany was close to defeat, so Ebert did not stab Germany in the back. But that's not important. The importance is that people perceived Ebert and the new Weimar government as stabbing Germany in the back and being these November criminals. Well, another key thing to understand is the Weimar constitution was, the voting system was proportional representation. Whilst it is incredibly democratic and a fair way of gauging how much support a different political party has in the country, there are a lot of weaknesses to proportional representation. One being that it allows extremist parties into government. One being obviously the Nazi party, which we'll talk in different posts about. So proportional representation also means that you can't necessarily get a majority. It's very hard to get a majority, which means that you're always going to have to make concessions with other political parties to work together. So right from the beginning, the Weimar government has problems. It comes to power, or after the Kaiser leaves, it is in power during a state of almost civil war in Germany. It has a weak constitution regarding proportional representation, and it is unpopular because it's perceived to have kind of betrayed Germany and signed the armistice. And this is later solidified in the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, which Germans hated. They despised the Treaty of Versailles and the terms of it and its effect on Germany. So that was solidified when the Weimar government signed the Treaty of Versailles. They had no choice. They could not sign the Treaty of Versailles. Britain, America and France would have invaded Germany, and the German army couldn't have stopped them. Not really, according to Hindenburg anyway. So it has a lot of political problems to begin with. The first major one was that from the Spartacists in 1919. In January 1919, the Spartacist League, which was a left-wing communist ideology, ultimately wanted to take over Germany. And they started with Berlin. It didn't succeed. This is Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht's attempts to take power. A lot of people say that Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht didn't actually lead this at all, but were kind of swept along with it. But either way, thousands of workers took over Berlin. And Ebert was in a very tricky situation. He'd become president by this stage. And he had not many choices. A lot of soldiers were already rebelling, and some soldiers had joined the Spartacists. So he didn't really have too many choices. But the one choice he did have was to mobilize ex-soldiers who despised communists, the Freikorps, who were right-wing, anti-communist, and rather angry at what happened to Germany after World War I. So Ebert, with the rest of the army that he could mobilise, and the Freikorps, put down the Spartacist uprising. Luxembourg and Liebknecht are murdered. But that's not the end of the left-wing communist attempts to take over. It happens in Bavaria and Munich, and again, Ebert employs the Freikorps to murder hundreds of Spartacists. Now, the long-term implications of this is the left-wing communists, and let's not forget, Ebert is the SPD, so he's moderate left-wing. The communists never trusted the Socialist Democratic Party, SPD, again, and that caused a long-term rift. So later, when the communists and the SPD could have joined together to oppose the Nazis, take over power, they didn't trust each other. So that's a threat from the left, the Spartacist uprising, Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht. Ebert uses right-wing paramilitaries, the Freikorps, to stop the communists taking over. But then, in 1920, Dr. Wolfgang Kapp, leads 5,000 Freikorps to take over Berlin. Ebert, again, is in a real problem. He has no great allies, and it shows the weakness, the fundamental weakness that he is in. He has to actually flee Berlin. Well, whilst he flees it, he calls a general strike. So whilst the Freikorps have taken over Berlin, the workers, so the communists to an extent, then go on strike and suspend all kind of public services. So trains, trams don't work, gas, electricity, power, will go on strike. So ultimately, this is paralysing for Dr. Wolfgang Kapp. The Freikorps ultimately can't do anything, and so Wolfgang Kapp leaves and flees, where he is later brought back to Germany and dies before he goes on trial. So this shows that Ebert was in a real problem. He's got threats from the left and he's got threats from the right. And he needs to play them off against each other to survive. They don't join him because they enjoy, like Ebert and the Weimar Constitution. They do it because they despise the left or the right more than they do Ebert. So those are some of the political problems that the Weimar Constitution the Weimar government, found in the early stages of the 1920s. We will do the Munich putsch later, because that's more to do with the early stages of the Nazi Party, which will be, again, a separate video. So, enjoy.